We're currently standing on the edge of a complete reinvention of the way we think about transportation in the modern age. For decades, car ownership has basically been an absolute necessity for many people, and it's hard to imagine a life where you don't have your own personal car. Of course, taxis and rideshare services and public transit have existed for a long time, but in most places, in the US at least, it's not a complete replacement for owning your own car. With that being said, this new era of autonomy has the biggest opportunity to completely upend our entire relationship with personal vehicles. With the rise of self-driving taxi services like Waymo and Tesla's upcoming Cybercab, rideshare transportation costs may drop so low that going without your own car will be entirely feasible in many more areas. With Tesla's FSD software improving dramatically with every update, we are much closer to this future than a lot of people may expect. We got our first look at the Cybercab a few months ago, and we know that Tesla is going to try to get this onto public roads and select test markets sometime within the next year. With that being said, making the shift into becoming a fully featured rideshare service is far from an easy task. That has opened up a lot of questions regarding just how exactly Tesla is planning on making this autonomous dream of theirs a complete reality. Today we're going to break down some of the biggest hurdles that Tesla will have to face in order to get their rideshare service off the ground, and how an Uber partnership or purchase could be in the cards. So let's get into it. A lot of people are quick to assume that Tesla is going to just design the software and infrastructure for their rideshare service entirely in-house. That is absolutely a possibility, but to just assume that does ignore many of the real challenges that come with running a service like this. Developing a robust app and software backend to handle an expansive rideshare service is not a small task. First, you have to develop and then subsequently manage a software service that can keep track of an ever-growing roster of vehicles. That system has to not only include Tesla's proprietary Cybercabs, but also have an opt-in feature for owners who want to use their personal cars as autonomous rideshare vehicles. At least this will be necessary for the vision of what Tesla is wanting to do. You'll have to have a lot of complex algorithms that handle assigning cars to riders, determining where cars can stop safely for pickups and drop-offs, and so on. These are certain things that may not sound so difficult on the surface, but when you compound this with millions of riders in a lot of varying conditions, it becomes a lot harder to manage. Tesla has a really talented and robust software development team, but even then, some experts think that Tesla may be underestimating the difficulties of creating a service like this from scratch. During a recent interview, the CEO of Uber expressed some doubts over the idea of Tesla managing this fleet themselves. To start, he reiterates the idea that building a luxury vehicle is a, quote, very, very different business than managing a rideshare app that handles over 30 million transactions a day, like Uber. The software has to handle all of the vehicle assignments, routing, payment, and more, without any hitches to the rider. Additionally, there is a customer service aspect of this program. You need a system that lets people report problems as they arise, like if somebody gets sick in the vehicle or realizes they lost something in the car. You need to decide how those problems are to be handled, and that's not to mention more serious situations where someone might have a medical emergency in the car or any number of other incidental scenarios. In short, Tesla has never really had to have that level or type of customer service before. That isn't to say that Tesla couldn't overcome these difficulties, but it would be a big hurdle for them that is pretty different from anything they have had to deal with before. Over the years, Tesla has been able to adapt and overcome a number of challenges that some could say are even harder than this. Still, though, it's a new market for them, and Uber's CEO thinks that the automaker could be greatly underestimating how hard it will be to make this a reality. Instead, he has suggested that both the rideshare giant and Tesla would both mutually benefit from a partnership rather than a competitive relationship. He argues that both companies bring something to the table here. Uber has a big lead in rideshare operation, and Tesla has a fleet of autonomously capable vehicles that could be added to the system very easily. Uber's CEO said here, quote, "It's taken us 15 years. It's taken us tens of billions of dollars of capital, and we can provide that instantly to a partner. Hopefully Tesla will be one of those partners." This would allow each company to stay focused on the things that they do best. Tesla would manufacture the vehicles and develop FSD without the nitty-gritty of developing a rideshare layer on top of that. This is very similar to the current relationship that exists between Google's Waymo autonomous vehicles with both Lyft and Uber. Waymo is currently operating in 4 cities across the US: San Francisco, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and Austin, with Lyft as their primary partner to actually facilitate the operations of running the service. At the same time, Waymo has actually been expanding their partnership with Uber to further bring these vehicles to both Austin and Atlanta. What's interesting about these partnerships is that under the current model, Uber, for example, is actually responsible for, quote, fleet management services, including vehicle cleaning, repair, and other general depot operations. The rideshare company has to actually handle all the logistics of keeping these vehicles running, and then the manufacturer just handles, quote, the testing and operation of the Waymo driver, including roadside assistance and certain rider support functions. Given Tesla's current autonomy goals, I'm not sure how feasible it would be that Tesla actually pursues this route. Tesla has always been a company that prefers to do things their own way and build their own software solutions to their problems. Take, for example, third-party cell phone integration like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Even though a lot of people really would want those features integrated into their vehicles, Tesla is unwilling to give up that degree of control over the software and user experience. It's that exact reasoning that makes me a bit hesitant to say that Tesla would ever want to wholly outsource something as important to their future as rideshare. Tesla wants things to work just so, and in their minds, having that extra layer between them and the customer is just an opportunity to create friction and add cost. If there was a problem in the rideshare software, I think Tesla would rather have it be internal and be able to deal with it themselves, rather than have another company handle it. With that said, in response to all of these concerns, some people have floated an interesting extra option. Given their big market cap disparity, Tesla actually has the option here to buy out Uber entirely. This would give Tesla immediate access to their entire rideshare infrastructure, into which they could link their robotaxi fleet. At the same time, Tesla would be preemptively eating up a competitor in a space that they would otherwise be just starting to get into. While that sounds like a pretty dramatic move for Tesla to make, it actually is somewhat feasible overall. At the time of writing this video, Uber as a company is worth about $136 billion. Tesla, by comparison, is worth $1.24 trillion. So at this time, Uber is worth about 11% of Tesla's total market cap. And if they were to initiate a purchase, we could easily expect there to be a premium boost up to 15% or more. On the surface, a lot of people doubt Tesla would do something like this, but in the past, they have not been above buying a company in order to own a key piece of technology that they created. For example, in 2016, Tesla bought SolarCity for $2.6 billion and morphed that company into the beginnings of their Tesla Energy program. More recently, Tesla bought the German company Wifarian, who primarily developed and built wireless charging technology. While Tesla eventually sold Wifarian, they kept on the entire team of engineers that developed these chargers. When Tesla unveiled the Cybercab last year, it was revealed that during their off hours, these cars would go to charge on wireless pads, presumably using the same technology that Tesla got from Wifarian. Another very similar situation here is Maxwell. Tesla bought Maxwell specifically for their dry cathode technology that they're now looking to implement in future 4680 cells and that they have prototyped on the Cybertruck. If Tesla were to buy Uber, this would be their largest and highest profile purchase to date. Personally, I think that buying Uber does have certain advantages for sure, but the company would also bring a lot of baggage to the table with it. As of September of 2024, Uber had over 7 million active drivers that utilized their platforms across the world. Since Tesla's goal with the Cybercab is to effectively replace human drivers, it doesn't seem likely that they would be interested in a company that almost exclusively uses human drivers to create their revenue. If we were to go back to the comment made by Uber's CEO that their system was built up using tens of billions of dollars worth of capital, then if those figures still hold true, it could be much cheaper for Tesla to build their own system after all. Tesla has the added benefit of already being a very successful company that can afford to make big investments into itself. Additionally, these apps have been around for a while now, and that collective knowledge of what makes a good rideshare service is pretty established. Developing their own service is probably the most realistic way forward for Tesla, and while there will definitely be some trial and error, I think it would be much less of an obstacle than many critics suggest. Based on comments they made during their most recent earnings call, it sounds like Tesla really wants to take strict control of their first robotaxi deployments. It seems like they will be designing the app from the ground up to facilitate their exact goals and not have any extra baggage. At the same time, when the software is ready, Tesla needs it to go off without a hitch for a lot of reasons. Obviously, they don't want anybody to get hurt, but if it makes a mistake, that could have legal and social ramifications for the entire project. Beyond the actual logistics of operating a self-driving rideshare service, there are plenty of other obstacles standing in the way of something like this becoming widespread. Perhaps the largest of them is the shifting legality of robotaxis and self-driving vehicles in general. Currently, existing robotaxi businesses are only really allowed to operate in very specific regions with very specific parameters. All current robotaxi services don't have complete free reign of all public roads. They are only allowed to operate in specific geofenced areas within the cities and regions where they are permitted. These areas are usually extensively mapped out ahead of time to provide the most accurate data on those specific areas to their vehicles. That's nice data to have, but it starts to become less practical when you want to expand your area of operation. The number of roads you need to map grows exponentially as you expand. That's the utility of Tesla's FSD software. Their AI-powered software is trained to travel on any road, regardless of whether a Tesla has ever driven it before. Teslas aren't designed to be geofenced because these vehicles can drive on practically any street. FSD has a lot of legal leeway to test on public roads because there is always a driver behind the wheel that is supposed to immediately intervene if the software makes a mistake. This isn't an option for many robotaxis out on the road, and lots of recent models are forgoing legacy driver controls entirely in their designs. The upcoming robotaxi is a great example of this, as it won't have a steering wheel or pedals in what would traditionally have been the driver's seat. These geofenced robotaxi services are, by comparison, very limited in their scope of operation. As I mentioned earlier, Waymo is currently only allowed to operate in 5 cities across the US. In those areas, those permits to operate are still only provisional and are not guaranteed to them. Just last year, GM's Cruise taxi service had their permission to operate in California revoked over pedestrian safety concerns that arose during their trials in San Francisco. That ended up signaling the demise for Cruise, as only a few months later their operations were completely stopped and they were incorporated into GM's internal self-driving division. This goes to show that even in places that have been friendly to self-driving taxis, there are still plenty of obstacles to their widespread rollout. Now, I will add a note here that I do expect that when Tesla launches their robotaxi service, they will probably start with geofenced areas as well. It just seems like it can expand a little quicker than these other approaches. Across the entire United States, there are countless laws regarding self-driving technology, and it will be quite a process to ensure compliance with all of those laws. In fact, there are many places where a completely autonomous vehicle would not even be allowed under current rules. When Tesla eventually does release the Cybercab, it's not going to be a nationwide simultaneous rollout like many are hoping. It's going to be a very slow trickle rollout, and for the first few years at least, I expect almost every new market it enters to be preceded by a lot of legal fighting and negotiations. Almost every state has their own laws regarding these vehicles, and very few of them really align, so it's going to be a huge ordeal to really bring these cars to a broad market, unless something changes on the federal level. California, for example, has actually been one of the states that has been the most willing to allow these robotaxis to test and operate on public roads. Waymo is, of course, the biggest example, but other companies like Zoox and even the Chinese company WeRide have been granted licenses to operate in the state. Robotaxi companies are certified by the California DMV and the Public Utilities Commission to operate on public roads within the state. Once they have that state-level certification, there isn't very much that cities or other local governments can do to stand in the way. When Cruise first launched in San Francisco, there was actually a lot of opposition from local government there. However, since it was approved by the state, it was allowed to operate there until they had their license revoked, like I mentioned earlier. California is likely going to be one of the earliest testbeds for this service, but during that recent earnings call, Tesla revealed that they have plans to launch their initial robotaxis in Austin, Texas as soon as this June. Those first few months of operation will prove critical for the service, and its future rollout will depend on its initial success there. Most other states across the country are not nearly as welcoming to the idea of robotaxis operating on their streets, and have considerably more restrictions on the technology today. As of September of 2024, 34 states across the country had adopted statutes of some kind related to the operation of fully autonomous vehicles. Of those, 19 states had statutes that permitted autonomous vehicle operation. 12, including Washington, D.C., allowed their usage only for testing or in pilot programs, and 3 have their own unique rules that cover more specific circumstances. The other remaining 17 states currently have no specific laws or rules regarding autonomous vehicles. But as the technology expands, I imagine we will be seeing them legislate this sooner or later. Even among those states which have allowed this technology to operate, not all of them follow the exact same rules. In Michigan, for example, it's not necessary for an AV to have a driver behind the wheel, but in Pennsylvania, it is a requirement in most circumstances. Florida, Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, North Dakota, Utah, and West Virginia don't require a driver behind the wheel, but only in vehicles that achieved level 4 or higher self-driving capabilities. As a quick reminder, current self-driving software features are rated by the SAE, or Society of Automotive Engineers, on a scale from 0 through 5. Level 0 vehicles have no autonomous driving features. Level 1 and 2 can provide steering and brake assist, but ultimately the driver is still in control, and levels 3 through 5 are truly autonomous, and the driver is not considered to be in control of the vehicle. Levels 4 and 5 are the only levels where a human driver is never needed to take over control of the vehicle while in operation. Tesla's supervised FSD system currently sits at level 2, since the driver has to constantly be paying attention and be ready to take over. Since Waymo vehicles don't have to have a driver, they are one of the few companies that has thus far shipped level 4 vehicles. Don't let that comparatively low level fool you though. Tesla's FSD-equipped vehicles are really remarkable and are getting better with every single update. It's not perfect, and that's where that driver supervision requirement comes into play, but on most days that I'm using FSD, I find that I'm rarely having to intervene. However, once you make that big step from supervised to unsupervised, that actually opens up a whole new legal dimension to operating these vehicles. With level 2 autonomy, since the driver is technically still in control of the vehicle at all times, they are still liable if the car gets into an accident or breaks the law while driving autonomously. Once you make that jump into level 3 and above, liability would shift over towards the automaker, since it is their software that is fully operating the car. Tesla's FSD software may be better than most other solutions that are out there right now, but Tesla isn't quite ready to take off the proverbial training wheels on FSD. Once the Cybercab arrives, or they push this functionality to current vehicles, there isn't really going to be any way around it. Those cars will have to be ready for level 4 autonomy, since there won't be a way for a driver to take over. Tesla is currently doing closed testing on the next versions of FSD that specifically won't require constant supervision while driving, which, when this releases, will be a huge step in that direction. We don't know exactly when unsupervised FSD will be coming, but Tesla has just recently given us some insight here. Even though the robotaxi will start launching in June on their current cars, they are not going to be rolling out the software to customer vehicles for a while. Owners won't be able to add their own cars to the robotaxi network until at least 2026, so we know the software won't be coming this year. That will be at least 6 months after the arrival of the robotaxis controlled by Tesla, until people can have it on their own cars. Once Tesla is ready to ship the Cybercab, I think that a lot of officials are going to need convincing before they allow them on public roads. In a sense, this is the utility of a staggered rollout like the one that these vehicles will inevitably have. States with more open rules surrounding autonomy will be the first initial test beds for this service, and once it has proven itself, more states are going to be willing to let them in. With that being said, it's important to remember that as impressive as FSD is, it's not a finished product just yet. While interventions are becoming rarer, there are still circumstances where it's necessary for a driver to intervene. One benefit that Tesla has over its competition, however, is that future iterations of the existing FSD software are what will go on to power the Cybercab. Every single day, Tesla is ingesting thousands of miles of driving data that is being used to improve and train their end-to-end neural networks. So even now, a time where there are no Tesla-branded robotaxis driving on public roads, those vehicles are still being trained every single day with the latest driving data. Even though the Cybercab is still months, if not years away, they are already being trained on data that could put them even more substantially ahead of the competition when they arrive. It's hard to imagine these services running entirely on the current iterations of this software, but given how rapidly it's advancing, Tesla thinks it will be ready to start service in only a few months. We've spent a lot of time today talking about the legality and logistics of Tesla launching a true robotaxi service, but there is one more big obstacle standing in their way: public opinion. No matter how cool FSD or the Cybercab may seem to people that are enthusiastic about the tech, there is still a large contingency of people who just don't trust it. For that kind of person, it's going to be very difficult to win them over. According to a 2024 study conducted by Kelley Blue Book, only 12% of Americans describe themselves as, quote, very trusting of self-driving technology, with another 22% being somewhat trusting. The most popular choice in the survey, with a 25% selection rate, described themselves as very untrusting of this technology. The tech has improved pretty considerably since that study was conducted, but I doubt that the average layperson follows it closely enough to actually know that. Clearly, public opinion surrounding autonomous vehicles is far from unanimous. In certain test markets for these robotaxis, there are plenty of customers who use them very regularly and report high levels of satisfaction with the product as is. Like I mentioned earlier, Los Angeles is one of the ongoing test markets for Waymo, and if you go downtown, you'll see plenty of these cars carrying passengers all across the city. Anecdotally, I've heard from some people in the LA area that know people that are starting to use Waymo as a verb for calling a ride instead of saying Uber or Lyft. Much like with FSD, most customers who are willing to give these services a try are pretty impressed by the technology and even willing to keep using it. Conversely, there are plenty of people around who are very skeptical of this technology and unwilling to engage with it. We've all seen plenty of examples of autonomous cars making questionable decisions and getting themselves into scenarios that you'd like to think you would have avoided if you were behind the wheel. There have been a lot of high-profile stories of autonomous cars that have hit other cars, things on the road, or even pedestrians. It's those stories of pedestrian accidents that led crews to lose their operating permits and eventually have to shut their doors. If you're not used to it, it can be pretty unnerving to hand over control to your vehicle and trust that it's going to correctly make decisions that impact your safety. To an extent, that's only amplified when you don't have any physical control that allows you to intervene if the car makes a decision that makes you uncomfortable. With all of that in mind, I think it may be quite a while before this technology has reached a point where the critical mass of people is comfortable using it. I do think that autonomous driving is going to be huge for the future of personal transportation, but how long do you think it will take before most people are comfortable using it? How much time and what milestones will have to be crossed before true autonomous driving is the average person's preferred mode of transportation? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If the last year has made anything abundantly clear, it's that Tesla and others are determined to make truly autonomous driving the most premier and cost-effective way to get around in the future. Tesla has designed their robotaxi to be easily scalable, so once they get production going and FSD to the level that it can function on these cars, its ramp up should be smooth and efficient. Rollout will of course be slow in the beginning as they get the program started, but once more places see how effective they really are, I think we'll start to see it expand much more quickly. Needless to say, that expansion is going to bring a lot of obstacles with it that Tesla is going to have to learn to overcome, and we may see them partner with someone else like Uber, buy someone like Uber, or simply decide to design this themselves. That poses its own difficulties, but at the same time, it would guarantee a system that operates exactly as Tesla intends it to, and at the cost that they control. In the meantime, I'm very excited to see them bring the first robotaxis to market this June, and to see how they perform in the real world. It really does look like the future is going to be autonomous, and when that day comes, it increasingly seems like Tesla will be at the forefront of this technology thanks to the data they've been collecting for years. That's all for today, but in the meantime, if you're interested in the latest Tesla news, you can check out that video linked up here or in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.